Welcome to Fleet News Podcast, where we talk about all things to do with vehicle fleets in Australia and sometimes in New Zealand. I'm Caroline Falls, and today I'm thrilled to present Liz Yeaman from New Zealand, where she has worked for decades in transport and for the last decade at least in its electrification. As a top public servant, a consultant at home and in the Pacific, and as a representative on international bodies. So welcome, Liz, and thank you for taking the time in your busy schedule to share your insights, particularly on the New Zealand model and progress.
Thanks, Caroline. It's great to be able to talk to you.
Firstly, I always like to let our audience know where you are coming from. So I sort of want to talk about what you're doing now. Like, you set up a consultancy in New Zealand, Retyna, in 2018, so 5 years ago, and you're now involved in some pretty exciting projects and trials in New Zealand and Brazil, for example, with electrification of ferries and heavy vehicles. But just tell us what's behind the name Retyna, which my computer spell checker, by the way, does not like. But what does Retyna do, and why did you feel compelled to go out on your own?
Yes, sure. So Retina is got two aspects to its name. First of all, it's about the eye and the vision. The retina is the part of the eye that captures and processes the information and creates real information from what it gathers. And it's also a reflection on the fact that the organisation focuses on renewable energy for transport, RET, and then my surname Yeaman, and the fact that I'm from New Zealand and we deal with associates. So it's not really an acronym, but the essence of what the business is about is within that acronym, renewable energy for transport, and the vision for that.
And why did you go out on your own?
I've been working previously to founding Retyna for the New Zealand government for 22 years at the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, EECA. And my kids had grown up and it was time for a bit of a change. So I decided to move out on my own. It was a good time. I'd started some really important programs that have been successful at EECA, such as what's now the Low Emission Transport Fund, which was helping pave the way for the new innovations at the time that were coming in around electric vehicles. And I just felt that I could take the experience, all the learnings I've had from the energy sector and the transport sector, and go back to what I actually originally liked doing before I had children, which was working around the world on getting projects up and going in new innovative energy spaces in transport.
Fantastic. I'm glad you brought up like the experience at EECA, because I wanted to know, like, how long ago did EECA start even thinking and acting on EVs, and how hard was that at the time? And are you happy with the progress since then?
Yeah, so I think I did my first electric vehicle project in about 2007 at EECA, so quite a while before EVs were really in commercial production. They were just starting to emerge in Japan, and we brought some very early vehicles over from Japan and ran a conference to try and raise the profile of electrification as a future transport energy. I think at that time a lot of people thought it was pie in the sky and wouldn't actually happen. But in terms of energy efficiency, it was really the way to go, and it built on what New Zealand has as a huge advantage, which is our very significant renewable electricity generation resources. We could see a way into the future, and we just needed to bring other people along on the journey. So we started providing information and running seminars and so on about electric vehicles to educate and inform and bring the first ones over to New Zealand so that people could see that they were real.
And again, like, how happy are you with the progress since then? I know that's a really big question because we're talking about 16 years, if my math is right.
Yes, somebody said the other day, it always takes longer than you think to get going, and then when you're going, it happens quicker than you thought it would. So it has taken a long while to get going, but I think that we're now over the crest of the hill for electric vehicles, and more people are starting to see that that's the future, and that it's now moving in a direction where you're not going to stop the change. We've got all of the international car manufacturers bringing out more and more models, stating dates when they will no longer be manufacturing petrol and diesel vehicles and only manufacturing electric vehicles. We've got international governments saying the same thing. We're starting to see electrification go into more and more applications and wider use. So I really think that you're on that downhill side of the momentum, and it's just going to keep growing and accelerating with the uptake. And it's what we need right now as we look to what's happening in North America at the moment, and Europe, with Europe literally on fire with climate change. And so, you know, it's a technology that we actually really need.
Yeah, you've just raised, you know, climate change, etc. And I was just wondering, what's your elevator pitch on how crucial it is to embrace electrification, not just for light vehicles, but also heavy vehicles and maritime and air transport?
If we need to, if we can try to keep global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees, which is still, you know, we're not even there yet, and we're still seeing the incredible impacts that's happening. We actually really need to electrify just about everything that we can in transport by 2050 in order to achieve anywhere near that goal. So we really need to keep moving in that direction. We actually needed to do it as quickly as possible. And I think it's got to go. I mean, obviously, personal passenger cars are a huge chunk of transport energy, even though individually they're quite small. It's also really important that we actually have to have alternatives to cars as well. It's not just swapping a car out with another one. We need to have great public transport, and certainly the electrification of buses provides a real benefit for public transport users. It's quieter, it's more attractive. You can charge your phone while you're going along in the bus. We need to get trucks, particularly in our city centres, electrified. Diesel emissions are the ones that cause health problems, that cause respiratory illnesses and other things, as well as you know, fouling the air that we look and see dirty cities. So that's where it's going to make the biggest difference. You know, as we have more delivery services coming in, we've really got to get that urban transport off of diesel and into electric for everybody's health, for quieter surroundings, as well as for climate change. I think during the COVID lockdown, people were amazed in some cities where the air cleared, and they were suddenly able to see vistas that they hadn't seen before, and they thought, wow, this is wonderful. And it's already almost forgotten, the fact that we had that clear air when you actually do something about getting rid of diesel and petrol emissions. And I think it's important not to lose sight of those things that can be achieved.
I mean, you're definitely bringing a global perspective, because one of the things I think, like, you're from New Zealand, I'm from Australia, and our air is generally clear because we just live in, you know, the southern hemisphere and etc. But no, everything you said, I'm totally on board with you. You will be chairing a conference in New Zealand in early September. I think it's the 5th and 6th, the New Zealand Electro Mobility Summit. Is this a new or recurring event? What's it all about? Who will be there? Do you have visitors from overseas, like Australia and other countries, coming to see how you do it in NZ? Is NZ a model?
Yes, so it's an evolution of a conference that's been going for a while, and it's great to see it there. It is the Electro Mobility event of the year. in New Zealand. It's a 2-day event, and anyone in New Zealand comes along to that. It's about the vehicles and the charging infrastructure and the policies, and where it's going. So it's a really good event. There's a big exhibition that goes with it where you can see the latest technology and the latest vehicles, and that's always really popular as well. So yes, it does bring together the government, industry, both sides of it, the electricity industry, the charging providers, as well as the vehicle and the transport sector and government. So it's an event that I'm really looking forward to. I chaired it last year, and it was great. It was a time when everyone was coming back together after COVID, and there's that real momentum there, I think, since then, that's going to see it bigger and better this year as well.
I haven't been to New Zealand for a very long time, since the 1980s, in fact. So I'd love to be there for that conference. But meanwhile, I remember it as having a lot of very old secondhand cars. And so I was just wondering if you'd tell me, what's it like? What's the car park in New Zealand like today? How old are the cars? And if they are still older, what are the implications of having an old car park?
Yes, New Zealand does have a relatively old car park, but on the other side of that, those old cars aren't driven very much. They have very low annual mileage. Um, so what you actually see driving around on the streets is actually more modern vehicles, particularly in city centres like Auckland and so on. And you actually really can see electric vehicles everywhere now. So electric vehicles in New Zealand are probably about 20 to 25% of new vehicle sales are electric that are coming in. And you see that. You drive down the street, you see Teslas, you see BYDs, you see a range of wide variety of electric vehicles everywhere. You see charging infrastructure when you know what to look for. So you can actually see it visibly, particularly electric buses. We've had a very high uptake of electric buses. There are hundreds on the streets now in our main cities. So it's becoming visible and noticeable, maybe more so if you know kind of what to look for. But sometimes you'll be sitting outside at a cafe and a few vehicles go past and you think, actually, I just haven't heard anything. So it is there. Yes, we do have a lot of older vehicles, but like I said, they're low mileage. Brand new vehicles are actually what does the high mileage. So in terms of impact that they're having, you're starting to see that already in petrol sales, and so on. So yes, you can see them quite a bit on the streets now.
Are there any lessons that New Zealand has for us in Australia or for other places on getting such a successful adoption rate?
You do need government support. I mean, the fact that Australia and New Zealand, we're at the other side of the world, we're a right-hand drive market, whereas the majority of the world is left-hand drive. We do everything in kilometres, but not miles, like the UK. So we are a different little niche market that's just a proportion of the world. And the problem that we have had up until recently has been actually getting supply of EVs. We still have far fewer models in New Zealand than would be offered in Europe or North America. And that's because we haven't had those policies that pull EV supply to New Zealand. And I think that's where the policies that have come in the last year or 18 months in New Zealand have actually made a real difference and increased the supply of vehicles here, as well as providing assistance for people to be able to afford to buy those EVs, and it's making a big difference.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, what are the advantages of the NZ state compared to, say, Australia, which has got several states as well as federal jurisdiction, in helping to roll out EV infrastructure or encourage EV adoption. So, and also, like, I know you're a non-exec director of ChargeNet, which I think has got some, is it 300 charging
Yes.
stations?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'd sort of, I'm really happy for you to talk about them in relationship to that whole political thing, like about the ease or challenges that they've had, like the single state versus what we've got in Australia. Yeah.
Certainly, I think the single state does help. It's made a clear policy right around the country from the start, and I think we've been really lucky with a couple of things. We have had government support. We've also had some private individuals in New Zealand who have made a big personal commitment, like Stephen D. West did when they founded ChargeNet. It was their personal belief in the future of electric vehicles and wanting to do something for the environment that made them put their personal capital into a big investment. So I think it's taken a lot of different organizations all working in the same direction, both entrepreneurs, established businesses, and government working in the same direction. And with the knowledge that we've got that renewable energy already, I think has been an advantage. It makes transport electrification potentially an easier sell than it has been in some of the Australian states, which still have a lot of coal-fired generation, even though there are still climate change benefits then, and investment now means over time things are still going to get clearer and cleaner and cleaner. It's just provided that little bit of extra impetus for us to be able to underline. I think we've also had bipartisan support. So a lot of the policies came in under a national government here and then have continued under a Labour government. So that has been really, really helpful.
I was also just wondering, like, as an industry, where does transport rank in New Zealand as a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions? Because in Australia, it's we're behind energy, but as you referenced earlier in our chat, New Zealand has a lot of renewable energy. So I think you've got a lot of hydro there. Certainly more renewable than we do in Australia. But where does transport rank? Is it the biggest contributor?
In terms of greenhouse gases, it's second after our ruminant animals, cows and sheep. So agriculture is our biggest single emitter, but on energy-related emissions, it's the largest and it's still the fastest growing, where the others are reducing. So it's pretty critical for us.
Finally, thinking about climate change and the steps and setbacks being made, how do you manage, like, maybe personal feelings? Do you feel overwhelmed sometimes? Do you feel optimistic sometimes? Yeah.
I do. I switch between them. Sometimes when you see the fires happening, and they've been happening in Australia. We had those terrible cyclones earlier in the year in New Zealand as well. It can be a bit overwhelming, and you see steps backwards with politicians in other countries and so on. But on the other hand, we have all the technologies that we need today, if we can implement them, to make a real meaningful difference for climate change. And it's government, it's big business, it's where people invest finance, as well as individual choices that all have to come in the same direction. I mean, it's great to see that wind and solar are now the cheapest forms of new electricity generation, and that we have technology that can use and electrify almost everything in transport now, that's on land transport, and starting to even emerge with shipping and short haul aviation as well. So things are moving in the right direction. The technology is there. We just need the collective will to apply it. And I hope that we have slightly longer memories than forgetting about the clean skies that we had around the world in COVID, and forgetting, about the fires that have been raging around the world and other climate disasters that are happening, to actually see, to make those next steps for everyone that's involved.
Well, it's a comfort to me to know that somebody as wise and insightful as you is, on board and helping to get us all there. So thanks for joining me here on Fleet News Podcast, Liz. It was just wonderful to get your insights. I loved it.
Thanks. Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you too.
You've been listening to Fleet News Group podcast. It was edited and produced by Isabella Fiorentino. You can follow us on Spotify. Just search for Fleet News Group. We're also on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. Our website is fleetnewsgroup.com, where you can get all of our stories, videos and podcasts. Until next time, drive safely and take care.